You're with NewsMakers. On the panel, Duncan, Webb, David Round and Garry Jackson. There has been a lot of frothing and foaming over the foreshore and seabed matter lately, and some eyebrows have been raised further by the government's endorsement of the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights. David, you were likened to a magnesium flare in the letters page of the press on Wednesday. Why do you think New Zealanders should be afraid?
To start off with, well, the reaction by Maori to the United Nations Declaration shows why we should be afraid of that. The United Nations Declaration is so widely phrased, it would entitle Maori to claim every acre of land in this country and to have special rights galore, left, right and centre, all paid for out of our pockets. And indeed, that is what Maori are already saying. I mean, even I wrote an article on this last year in which I said, look, even Labour did not sign this declaration, and where fools hesitate to rush in, surely angels should hesitate to tread. But I think it is utterly foolish of John Key to have signed this, and I think that this and the utterly disgraceful foreshore and seabed law are really going to set the seal on the inevitability of serious racial conflict in this country. Even though there has been that proviso put in that New Zealand's law has precedence? Oh, yes, already we have Mai Chen and Eddie Jury and others saying, oh, no, international law really is going to be persuasive down the track. And our present appalling Chief Justice actually has claimed, fortunately off the bench, that she should be entitled to overrule, and she considers herself entitled to overrule New Zealand Acts of Parliament if justified by international law.
So she's in good company there, though.
So who else is doing it?
Lord Cook of Thorndon.
Well, here's another disgraceful old hypocrite, but I'm glad he's dead.
Yes, yeah, the two highest judges.
Yes, the two worst judges New Zealand has ever produced.
Do you think John Key was naive to allow Peter Sharples to traipse off to New York with us?
I think it's woefully overdue, and I don't accept David's points in this regard. I mean, it's well set out. We're one of the few countries that has a relatively robust Indigenous treaty with the Treaty of Waitangi as it's been developed over time. That was mentioned in our accession to it, and it was always stated that it was that the rights encapsulated in the declaration were subject to the treaty and to the treaty claims and settlements process. Look, we are in the last three countries in company with Australia and the United States, and God knows the United States rarely signs anything of any worth. So, and Australia's got such a poor record, it's in real trouble because it's never recognised the rights of Indigenous people. So, well overdue, and the Labour Party would have done well to sign it earlier and not let the National Party steal a march.
And this is coming from a Labour Party man. This is a historic moment. Yes. Do you think these actions are going to pour fuel on the treaty grievance industry?
I don't think it's going to pour fuel as such. I hear what David beside me is saying, but what troubles me in it all, I think, Mike, is just the lack of clear communication to the people of New Zealand about what this is all about and what it all really means. I mean, we're all trying to read between the lines, we're all trying to understand the detail. And quite frankly, I think the government has actually failed in its communication, and I guess some would call it its consultation responsibilities, to actually take the people of New Zealand with it. Right. And that really worries me, because I think there is a huge gap, and out of that there is suspicion, there is misunderstanding, there is uncertainty, and all of those things.
I'll let our friendly magnesium flare have the final word on this.
Sadly, the government isn't interested in consultation. The government is trying to push this through with as little input from the non-Maori population of New Zealand as possible. And if they do, I will be actively campaigning against the government at the next election, because they will have shown themselves as a lot of disgraceful breakers of their election promises and traitors to the common good.
And this is coming from a National Party man, another historic moment for this.
You won't be standing on the list this election then, David.
Certainly not.
Oh dear. Now, Dame Margaret Baisley and her team officially seize the reins of Environment Canterbury tomorrow. Some interesting developments throughout the week. It's been revealed that Justice Ministry officials strongly urged the government not to suspend democracy. The last Labour government was planning to hold a commission of inquiry into ECAN, but the election intervened, and on Tuesday the Labour opposition pledged to rescind the ECAN Act and restore democracy. What do we make of all of this, Garry?
The Justice official piece, that's the first I've heard of that, Mike, so I can't comment really on that. It doesn't surprise me, but the fact that the previous Labour government government and the officials within the ministry and the minister were aware of the issues. I am aware of that. I have heard that. And to me, the question that needs to be asked there is, what level of communication had taken place with the chair of Environment Canterbury in that period of 04 through 09 before the leadership change, and what did he do about that? What is the level of communication that took place within that council, both at the governance level and between governance and management? What did they decide to do? Where was all of that going? And none of us know the answers to that, and I think that's a key question that needs to be asked.
Where are you at with all of this, David?
I dare say the governance of Environment Canterbury wasn't perfect, but then what organisation's governance is, I can't help but think that all of this is simply a beat-up in order to enable the utterly unprincipled exploitation of every last drop of Canterbury's water. That appears to be reasonably clear. And there are all these parts of the new legislation which are being put in, which enable, for example, alterations to be made to water conservation orders. I'm utterly cynical of this whole process. If you were to examine any and in fact, even Wyatt Creech found that large parts of Environment Canterbury's governance was perfectly acceptable. The Labour Party consideration of a commission was because Canterbury was, if anything, too prodigal about handing out water. And now that Environment Canterbury tried to impose some restraint, not before time, it finds that it's given the chop.
Okay.
If there's any rate strong, I'm going to join it, and I would urge reviewers to do so also.
Well,
Duncan, very quickly, your thoughts?
Well, I think actually the Creech report is interesting reading because it isn't a sufficient basis upon which that Act should have been passed. Most concerning for me as a lawyer is the idea that that matters of the water conservation orders for the Hurunui have been taken out of the hands of the court and handed to commissioners, things that were halfway through, and that just is bizarre and frankly unconstitutional.
Are you troubled by that?
Not at all.
Are your constituents troubled by that?
Not in the main. I've had 2 letters from Hurunui constituents who've voiced their concern with regard to the water conservation order in particular. I think within the water conservation order, we also have to remember that the minister had the last right of veto anyway. We could have spent another 2 years going through the Environment Court with a whole lot of money to be spent, still with the minister having a final veto.
I predict that'll still happen, and I know that there's no right of appeal except on points of law, but I know that people feel strongly enough about this to take every possible avenue. And all that's happened now is there'll be more and different avenues.
Okay.
The final point I want to make on this, Mike, which is a point that it needs to be re-emphasised because it's got lost. Canterbury now has a water management strategy, which was developed by a cross-functional group of all of the interest holders and stakeholders. That strategy puts environmental protection and restoration first, and then after that, in a parallel and balanced way, any development proposals. That strategy is now recognised by the special legislation that put the commissioners in place. The commissioners are required to give effect to that.
They could have given the strategy special legislation power without sacking the councillors, though.
Well, it then would raise the question about the capability of that council, given its track record, to actually deliver it, given the political infighting and all the other issues, and it's way beyond water, David, the issues within that council. This is not just a water issue.
All right, we'll take a break. In a moment, we'll switch to freedom camping. Where's your wicked camper? Off we go. Back shortly.